learn about Gemara. Today's daf is daf Kufnun. Just to recap what we did yesterday, we said that if a person who's dying a shchivmera, if he left some property behind, distributed the majority of it, but left some behind, obviously he thought that he was going to recover, and he needed something to sustain himself. So whatever he gave is considered a matnas bari, is a valid matana. He cannot change his mind if he recovers, and a kinyan needed to be made. And the question is, how much does he have to leave behind? So we had Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav that he has to leave behind enough karka to sustain himself, as the Rishonim say, a farm, so that he can grow every year, produce every year, or if it's money in the bank, if there's interest, that he can live every year, so enough to live the rest of his life. And comes along Rabbi Yosef and challenged that. He says, first of all, it says in the Mishnah, karka. What do you tell me? I said with, even metaltlin. How can a Yimar Abba say that even metaltlin is enough to survive on? Second thing, it says it's kosher. So yesterday we learned Abaye said to Rabbi Yosef, what I think karka means necessarily karka. We find in other places we use the word karka and it includes metaltlin. Like the case of the Eved, he gave the Eved all of his assets and he held back one karka. We say maybe he held back the Eved as well. And then we had Abdimi who said that even if he said metaltlin and he said I'm holding one back, metaltlin, the Eved could be the one's held back. So the Mishnah says karka, and Abdimi is talking about metaltlin because karka is a generic term, can include metaltlin as well. Love dafka karka. And so Abaye challenged Rabbi Yosef, but Rabbi Yosef gives an answer on that. And then now Abaye is going to challenge the other Rabbi Yosef. So Abaye is going to say, when you have a good reason to use the word karka because the style of what you're writing, the syntax, then karka doesn't necessarily mean karka. But on Mishnah, there's no reason to say karka unless it meant taka karka. Now Abaye challenges, do you think koshu means literally koshu? Says the Gemara, about 8 lines on the top of the page, beginning of the line. Are you telling me that every time it says koshu, leslie shuda, it means the minutest amount, there's no minimum? But Tanan, we learned, Abdais ben Herkinis says, there's a mitzvah called one of the 24 gifts that you have to give a kohen is the first shearings of a lamb. There has to be a minimum of 5 lambs before we can say that you have stock here of wool, and you have to give it to a kohen. According to Abdais ben Herkinis, you need 5 sheep, and how much does each sheep have to produce? It goes mana paras, 1.5 mana. Each sheep has to produce a 1.5 mana of wool as a minimum before you are chayiv to give that to the kohen. Chayav is bereish gaze. That's when you have the obligation as a gaze. Chacham disagree. They say also we agree 5. We also agree to the share of mana paras, but not from each individual sheep. The aggregate has to be a minimum of a mana paras, and each sheep should have a minimum of 1/5 of that amount. If one sheep has less than that, and another sheep has more than that, you don't equal them out. And they use the word koshein. It says koshein, and yet it still has to be a minimum, and together collectively you have a 1.5. Each one should be a 1/5. Again, Abaye says, you say, Rabbi Yosef, that the word koshu, you take it literally. Here it says koshein, it doesn't. Again, Rabbi Yosef will say no. Hasan bedinu do lalisa koshu. There, it makes sense why it says, what do you call it? You're right. He didn't have to say kosher because you need a minimum. But you know why he said kosher? But I did the Tanakama shira rabba amadi and shira zutra. Korrelate kosher. We're up to Kufnan and Aleph and 2 lines above the wide lines. So Rabbi Yosef says to Abaye, he answers him, kosher where there's no reason to kosher means literally kosher. Sorry?
Isn't it Kufnun?
Kufnun, yeah, Kufnun. That literally, kosher literally means the slightest amount. If there's no reason to say anything else. But over here in the Mishnah of the case of the sheep, where the Rav Deisa said you need each individual sheep to have a mana paras, a substantial amount, and he wants to show that it doesn't have to be such a substantial amount, he used the word kosher. Over there, it's to counter what Rav Deisa says. So even though he used the word kosher, it didn't mean literally nothing. I mean, compared to what you're saying, it's like a kosher. Now, there's a big machlekes rishonim, so who's the halacha like? We're going to learn the Gemara in a minute, where it seems that Rava says the halacha is even a mashahu. In other words, we disagree with Rabbi Yehuda Marab, who says that karka you need enough to sustain yourself. We disagree with Rabbi Marab, who says metalka enough to sustain yourself. And we disagree with that. Why? Because Rabbi Yosef asked the question. It says karka, says kosher. And that's how the Rif and many Rishonim Paskin. Others, like the Rosh and others, totally disagree. They say that nobody argues with Rabbi Yehuda Marav and Rabbi Yim Barabba. Rabbi Yosef just challenges and says, "How do you know?" He doesn't say, "I disagree." And Abaya, yeah, he's asking. I'm trying to understand. And Abaya answered them all. How come over here, even though it says karka kosher, it doesn't mean karka means even talton, it means a significant amount. Rabbi Yosef answered back Abaya. So they said Rabbi Yosef's answers were not very strong. And therefore they do pass like they said it only makes sense. The whole idea is that if he keeps something for himself, he believes he's going to survive. So if he keeps only a sliver of land, he's not going to survive more than a day. That's called thinking he's going to survive. Maybe he just couldn't give it all up, but he really believes that he's going to pass away. So therefore they said Allah is like Yehuda Merav. Okay, we're up to the 2 dots. We're going to learn a series of halachas. Amar, if a person is dying, says metaltali leplanya. My metaltalim should be transferred to that person. Kol mane tashmish lekani metaltlin. What comes under the umbrella of metaltlin? Anything, all the utensils, everything else, except food. For example, wheat and barley, but food is not called metaltlin, even though practically speaking, it's metaltlin. You can move it, but it's not, when people will not refer to food as my metaltlin. Metaltlin is a commodity that is mobile. Kol metaltlin plani, but if he adds the word kol, all my metaltlin, then I feel chidusari. Then by saying all, what are you adding? Even food. Afilu the top of the mill, the stone that's on top of the mill, because you take it off from time to time, clean it to repair it and so on. So therefore, when you say kol metaltlin, it's included. The stone on the bottom, the millstone, you never really move at all. So even though it could be moved, but you never move it. It's stationary, so it's not included in kol metaltlin. But if you say kol dim metaltlin, anything that can be moved, then you include that as well. Boy, you'll have a question. When you say I'm giving my karka metaltlin, where does the evet fit in? Now the Rishonim already all point out that an evet is karka. We already had a number of times. You don't swear on avodim. Because avodim huksul kakois is lachaltem oisim of nechem achareitim. You don't swear. There's no cheating by avodim. Whatever the law is by karka, the same law applies to avodim. But the question here is, when people talk, we're not talking about a legal question. We're talking about here, what do people mean in their intention when he said, "I'm giving you my karka"? Is an evet included? If he says, "I'm giving you all my metalton," is an evet included? Where does evet fit in people's minds? Because on the one hand, it's like karka, on the other hand, it moves about. So where is it? If somebody sells a city, we had this Arab concept of we have in Australia, people sometimes sell a whole island, with everything on it. So there's a concept. People used to sell cities. You had 100 people living in a place. It's a city, and he sold the city. So what's included in that sale? Mochad, he sells botim. He sells all the houses, shichin and midas, all different caves and all that kind of stuff. The bathhouses, a base, a badin, base, and everything that's included in the city, including those fields that need irrigation. Avaloyes and metalton, not part of the city. But it was mansha amad he the whole masha betoicha, that everything that's inside the city, that afila hayiba behema, even if there's an animal there which moves about, or even servants, or slaves, kulan mechuda, they're included. Now you're saying even slaves. Now, when you sold the city, the slaves are not included, or the behemoths. It's only when he said kol masha b'teicha. Now, if slaves have the status of karka, so when you sold the city, why didn't you sell the slaves with it? Is that raya that slaves are considered metaltlin? That slaves are considered metaltlin because they move about. That's why it wasn't sold in the first case when you sold the city. But if you can tell me that's like karka, why isn't it sold when you sold the city? Someone asked back, okay, so you're happy, right? So you're happy, you proved to me metaltlin. That's the question. If it's considered like metaltlin, so why does the Mishnah say afilu avodim? All metaltlin are included. Why should avodim be any different than metaltlin? Unless you want to tell me the two kinds of metaltlin. There's a metaltlin that even though it's portable, you have to move it. So you have total control. And then there's metaltlin like avodim, they walk on their own. And you have no control. It's a different category of metalton. So you want to tell you that even those metalton that have a mind of their own are included. No, say the same thing as karka. Really, it's karka, but when you sell the city, you're only selling karka that's stationary, not karka that moves about. So it doesn't prove one way or another here. What's the filu? Elamai from shiny metal to deny the metal to deny this kind of metal. No, ever zef will tell me I can argue about the character, shiny macaca, deny my character. Oh, but Ravina says Ravashi, Toshma. I'll bring you another ayah. It says, Hakois, we had this just yesterday. If somebody writes to his Evid, I'm giving you all my assets, then one of the assets that the owner owns is the Evid himself. So Yatsa ben Chayid. The Evid now is been liberated. But if he says, Shayed Karka Koshu, if I'm leaving behind a sliver of karka, then Yatsa ben Chayid, because the Evid might be the karka that he's leaving behind. That's the kind of comment. If you say you can leave behind a piece of karka, then the evid is not what you held back. Unless you say, Stam, I'm holding something back, something of a little value. Then could be that's what the evid is. If he says, if he says, give me everything. Except the value of 1/10,000, that was even a minimum amount, could be that's the evid, and therefore the evid doesn't go free. And once the evid doesn't go free, nor does he get into the assets because Komash can never go to. So why do you write the start in the first place? Just to make the evid feel good. Amar Abdimi by Yosef, Amar Abelazar comes along Abdimi and he adds, and he says, also metaltlin shear eitzel evid. That even though it says here you left behind karka koshu and he doesn't go free, the same thing would apply if he said, I'm leaving metaltlin koshu. The evid would not go free. Why? Because the evid can also be considered like metaltlin. Why? Even halachically he's karka, because he moves about. Because he's mobile, we treat him like a metalton. And that's what we used yesterday to prove that karka doesn't necessarily mean only karka. Karka can be metalton as well. So now he says here, but like also metalton shit, also metalton, when it comes to an evid, he's considered, if I say I'm holding back something, the evid was held back. But like also metalton sheer, when he says I'm giving to all my children, I'm giving to my wife. If he said I'm giving to my wife, if he's a karka, then she's meichel the ksuba, and she's happy to be counted as one of the children. We don't care the value of the karka is less than the value of the ksuba. But if he said I'm holding back metalton, she's not meichel the ksuba because there's no metalton by ksuba, right? In the Gemara's times, you couldn't claim there's no shibud on the metalton. Big machlik is training. What happens after the Rambam? What happens after the goyin and put in institutions that metalton also shibud the ksuba? Does it change all of these laws or not? But anyway, getting back to our point here. But Amalei Rav Nachman, my time, what's the svara? Why should there be a difference by an evid if you say I'm holding back metalton and you say maybe holding back evid? And why by ksuba we say that I'm holding back metalton, the ksuba, then she's not much. What's the difference? So he said, so Rav Nachman said, Av the metaltlu metaltla habashir. An evid is treated like metaltlin, and therefore if you say, because he moved about. If you say I'm holding back one piece of metaltlin, maybe what you're holding back is the evid, so he doesn't go free. Or the ksuvas isha mekakoyi. The ksuvas isha she soimer das an karka. Metaltlin kakoyi habashir. And therefore you say you're holding back a stick of metaltlin, it's not considered a shear because she doesn't rely on metaltlin on the ksuba, so she wasn't meichel the ksuba. If you say I'm distributing my wealth amongst my children and I'm giving most of my wife some cash or whatever it is, then she's not meichel ksuba. Says the Gemara or any metaltlin. So is that a clear idea that an evid is true? Like that people when they speak and they say metalton, an evid is metalton. Amalei. So the Gemara said back, no rai from here. You know why? Mishum the lav krus gita masninala. Different reason altogether. You know why the evid doesn't go free? Because it's not krus gita. We learn lala meisha. All the dinner of an evid, we learn exer shavi hamgida chagiga and other places that you learn lala meisha. It's like whatever dinner meisha has. And one of the things about Isha is it has to be safer because no strings attached, nothing left. So one of the pshatim of the Shainim is that the pshat of here is in this very star that I said that you can keep all the assets. In the star, I'm saying I'm retaining one piece of metaltlin. That means the star itself, some strings attached. The string of one piece of metaltlin. So even though the metaltlin might not mean the evet, could be evet, not metaltlin. An evid is karka. But because the star that we are using to set him free, that star shikhr, has in it a shear, holding back something, then the balabos has a chelik in that star. That's not dover hakoides beinoy lebeino. So the people of Kiva Egg and all that is a chakira. When you say I'm giving you everything but this tree, let's say. I'm giving you all my property except this tree. So what's pshat? Is the pshat is the chatzchila I didn't give you the tree. Or the pshat, I gave you the tree, but it's my share on it. I'm giving it to you, but it's different. The way you have is different than everything else, because everything else you have total control. Here, I'm in total control of it. It's my shares on it. I gave it to you, so I took it back. And the nafkamina is how to understand the Gemara here. Because exactly what we just learned right now. If the word is, I'm telling the evidence. The evidence is not metalton, right? Let's say the evidence is let's say not metalton. I'm holding something back. If I'm holding it back in evidence karka, so I'm not holding the evidence back. If the word is that I have given everything, but I'm placing a layer on top of one particular item, that means the Bava Basra's condition is sitting inside the shtar. If the word is I'm selling you everything except one piece of metalton, and does not mean the evid, then the Bava Basra has no chelik in the shtar. I never gave it to you in the first place. That particular metalton I'm retaining here, it's not part of the shtar. Where's the problem Cruz Gita here? The only problem you have Cruz Gita here is because the Bava Basra is still in the shtar. Why? I mean, I gave this to you, but I'm taking it back. Or my power over it is so strong that even though in theory you have it, you don't have it. Because I have a shear on it. And that's the only way to understand. That's why the other Shainim give another pshat in this Gemara here. Not like that. More to do with the words that he uses rather than the shtar itself. Because how do we understand a shear in a shtar? Is the pshat is I never gave it to you in the first place? Or I gave it to you, but I have my shear on it, and therefore I can't release it to you because I have a shear on it. And that's what it seems from here in this second pshat with the Rashbam and others Shainim here. Yeah. Okay, back to the Gemara. Because the other pshat of Shainim is once I hold something back, how do I know that in my mind I'm also not holding back the evidence? It's not an open-ended. If I would have said I'm giving you and the houses and the trees, it's open-ended. Because I said I'm giving you everything, I'm not holding it back. So we start thinking, since I'm holding something back already, maybe I'm holding something else back as well. It's not a complete severance, not a complete cut. Nothing to do with the chsaron in the shtar, because they understand it's not a chsaron in the shtar. Because when I say shear, I didn't give it to you. Nothing to do with, I have no chelik in a shtar. So what's the problem? The problem is once I'm holding something back, remember holding small things. And you're back to the Gemara. Yeah, so Gemara doesn't conclude anything one way or another. So there's an interesting chakir in the Rishonim. So if a person writes, I'm holding something back, but he didn't call it karka, didn't call it metal. If you call it karka, we don't know if it means ever or not. We call it metal, because the Gemara remains, we don't know what a person means when he says ever, karka, metal. So what happens if you don't call him karka or metal? Just say my assets is an ever included. Or you say, sorry, if you say all my karka, my metal I'm giving you, is an ever included, because maybe an ever is neither. Because he moves around, we don't have a category for him. Not the pshat is that we don't know which category he fits into, but there is no category unless you spell it out. Anyway, back to the Gemara. Omar Rav Nachman. Now that Rav Nachman says Chamisha, there are 5 different cases that the only way it applies is if you distribute everything. If you leave anything, you retain everything back, the whole thing falls apart. But one of them obviously is Shchir, we said before. Shchir is only if you distribute entire wealth. If you leave something behind, we say that's not really giving away. If you recover, the whole thing falls apart. So there are 5 examples of that. Omar Rav Nachman, Chamisha, there are 5 examples. Achi Yichtavu Kol Nichseim. It really writes all the Nechashav Elohim. Number 1, Shchiv Merah, the case of a Shchiv Merah. We'll soon see. He'll spell each one out. The next one is the case of Avdoi, and the next one is Ishtoi, his wife. We'll soon see his case. A bond of his children, and Mavrachas, where she tries to hide her assets. So you want to explain each one. Shchiv Merah, now we learn Shchiv Merah Shekosov Kol Nechashav La'achedim, all of his assets. V'shayir karka koshu, he leaves behind one piece of karka. Matanosek kayemis. Then the matana, even if he recovers, it remains steadfast. The only time that it doesn't is in other words, if you leave a little bit behind, it doesn't work. It only works if you give everything away. That's case number 1. Lo yishayir karka, you don't leave any karka. Ein matanosek kayemis. Then it unravels. Avdei, what's the case of an Eved? Now we learned Hakoisev Kol Nechosov Avdei. We just learned. You're right. I'm giving all my assets to an Eved, then Yotzei Ben he's included. Shayet Kaka Koshu, you leave behind even the slightest amount. Lo Yotzei Ben. Now, those are showing who paskin that Koshu means even a Mashu. They use that I as Eved. How much do you have to leave behind? We said before, echad miribui, 1 out of 10,000, which is nothing. How many people have that much? That 1 out of 10,000 is so significant. It's nothing. So by an evid, if you say I'm holding back even a mashu literally or a kosher literally, the evid does not go free. So this they bring a raya that Rabbi Yosef is right. That kosher means literally a kosher, not like Rab Nachman or not like Rav said before that it has to be enough kadei panasasa, enough that he can live the rest of his life, and so on. That's the basis of those who argue with those who say that lalchad was like the rif. Ishtai, his wife, if he writes all my assets is to my wife, and we say we don't believe for a minute that a person will give away all his assets to his wife, take away from his children, must be he wants her to be the executor of the state, nothing really hers, and he wants the children to have covet for her because they need her to be nice to her. But only if he gave it all. If he gave her most of it and left something behind, then she owns it. Bond of his children. Now we learned how he writes all of his assets to children, the cost of the ishta kago, and then he includes his wife as well. And he said, "I'm giving you the smallest amount of karka, even though it's worth a lot less than ksuba." She's meichel, and she gives up the ksuba. And we said before the hana that she's included as a member of the family and the children, everything else, she's prepared to give it all up. Of the ksuvasa, she loses the ksuba. So here we say a koshu. If we learned before, if he left behind even one palm tree, just like he left behind the one palm tree, and that goes to her, she's not meichel anything. She gets everything else as well. So again, here we have a koshu. If he works here, yeah, and the next one is mavrachas. A woman who's an almana is getting married. She has a lot of assets, and she doesn't want this new husband. Here we have today a thing called what is it called? When you get married, what is it called? You sign a contract that you don't get any of my a prenup. So in those days, if she got remarried and she passes away, it goes on to her husband. She doesn't want that to go to her husband, and she's not even sure the marriage is going to work. So she hides them, and a husband only yashins assets that he's aware of. Hidden bank accounts, he has no shaykhs. Because remember, it's holding zakamim we paskin, and therefore only things that he's aware of we want it to be shalom bayis. But if you don't know about it, no issue. So she's mabracha, she hides it, but she does when she hides it and puts someone else's name. She does. We had the whole story in Mark Suda. They would put in his daughter, and then she didn't want to give it back. We're saying that it's only he's not giving it to them for it to keep, only to hide. So when does that work? If she gives all the assets there. So we learn amavrachas where she hides the assets. She has to give away all of assets, but she gives away part of her assets, then that person gets to keep it. All of these cases, they have in common that metalcally have a shear levar miksuva. By ksuva, in the case of the mother and with the children, is only if he gives her a piece of karka. But if he gave her a piece of metalclin, she's not meichel ksuva. Now, so some of the Yishayim say, you see, when it comes to karka, we make a distinction between the 5 cases. So when it comes to mashu, also, not all the cases are the same. When it comes to shchibura, a koshu means enough to live on the rest of the life. Just like we see, even though we bunch together all 5 cases, but not identical when it comes to karka metalglin, nor are they identical when it comes to koshu. And others say no. The Gemara only highlights karka, which means, but every other respect, exactly the same. How much do you have to leave behind? A koshu. Ameima says, however, those metaltlin, there's certain metaltlin you incorporate in the ksuba that when she leaves the marriage, she takes it back, the isnu be'anayu, and they're still there, havishir. Then that she put it in the ksuba, and if she dies, the husband yashes it. If it's still there, then it's considered a shir, and she's meichel ksuba, because it's right there, she's soymech das. He said nechosai leplanya, my assets to that person. What's nechosai? He didn't say karka. We had a whole diyun. Karka. What's karka? But if you use the word nechosai, assets, not land, but assets, then avda ikar nechosai. We'll see in a minute. Avda, exactly. I'm going to go through what the word nechosai includes. Avda ikar nechosai. A slave is called nechosai as well. Is definitely included. Just like silver and gold are commodities, they're nechosai. It's like karka, but in nechosim, so too is this. Now we learned Hakaisim Nechasav. Hakaisim Kol Nechasav Lavde. He writes all Nechasav Eved. Yotzei Ben Chayin goes free. So we see the word Nechasav includes an Eved. Ara Iker Nechasav. Definitely land is included in the word Nechasav. It's now we learned Nechasim. Sheyesh Lenachais, which is land. When you say land, I always give a guarantee that if my lender comes and takes away from you, I'll reimburse you. So we see the word Nechasim covers land. Nikne Mekadosh Lachzaka. Glima. So too commodities, metaltlin, literally metaltlin, like shirts or any metaltlin. Ikon nechasa, lokom nechasa. How do I know that? Because now we learned. We learned in Gemara Kedushin. She'ein lehen achrayis. Ein niknin ela mashicha. Those the chasim that nobody takes responsibility for, which is metalton. How are you kind of with mashicha? So we see the word nechasim covers metalton as well. So it's a generic term and very inclusive. Zuzah. Iker nechasei. Zuzah money is also called nechasim. That now we learned. Ein lehem achrayis. Those metalton. Niknin im nechasim sheyesh lehen achrayis are included with the chasim that have achrayis. Right. So if you sell a karka and metalton, you make a chazak on the karka, you're kind of the metalton. Bekesav v'shtar chazaka. So we see they're all included in the chasim. And how do I know that? Because how do I know that money can be included in the word of chasim? All you know is that you took money and you made a kinyan on the karka using money. How do you know the word of chasim includes money? I'm giving you all my chasim. I know it includes my bank accounts. Because the hadra papa so right now it says the chasim that achrayis is kind of, and with it comes along the chasim she'em kinyan agav. So we saw a story and we had it for it. Everyone has 12,000 gold. It's amazing. But a papa was rich. Yeah, so and Robert didn't have mazel, so maybe it was serious. I don't know. They had 12,000. Yeah, a brewery had 12,000 dinim. But he lent it to somebody in the city of Chazai, and he didn't have the time. He couldn't go there personally. The problem is if he would send a shliach to pick up the money, that the borrower would refuse to give it to the shliach. Because the din is if the shliach takes the money and loses the money on the way, the borrower is still responsible. So why in the world would the borrower give the money to the shliach and he will lose it? Exactly. So what he did was he decided to give the debt of 12,000. He gave it to this person. He said, now the money is yours. So if you lose it, it's your chayes. It's your money. And this way, the borrower is comfortable giving the money because the debt he owes now is no longer to that papa. He owes it to this person. How did that papa transfer the ownership of that money to that person? Couldn't do a maimer slush and they weren't all there together. So what he did was, he said, I'm giving you part of my threshold of the house. And here, included in that piece of karka, you're getting the money. So clearly, money is kind of with karka. And how did the Mishnah describe that example? The chasim sheyesh lehem achrayis, you're kind of the chasim she'ein lehem achrayis. So money is included in the chasim. Kiyasa, when this person came back with the money, the papa was so exuberant. Nafak la'ape, he went and met him at Tovich, a distant city, not sure how far it is, and to embrace him and take the money. He was so happy. Some of the Shainim say that you know why he went why he was so happy, because the guy could have kept the doorway of his house. He gave him the doorway of his house, and he went to him to make sure the guy gives him back the doorway. So that's why he went there. Other Shainim don't think that's shot. They were just happy that he brought the money in one piece. Anisha does. The guy could have taken the money and absconded. Study is also considered assets. There are two studies. There are two kinds of studies. Omar, if he says somebody is he says to Reuben, I want you to do me a favor. Here's a Kenyan Suddha. I want you to be kind in exchange of the Suddha, this property on behalf of Shimon. Right? Kenyan, it's a Kenyan, it's a chus. And the Kisel is a star. And I also want you to write a star raya. I want you to write a star that he has evidence that that the land is his. The moment we did the Kinyan Chalip in Fafal, I can no longer change my mind. But Kozman, this person didn't write the star, I can change my mind. I don't want necessarily to have the star to be out in public. The problem with the star is, especially the starai, the problem with the starai is that people find out that you're selling the house, right away rumors, people's tongues are wagging. The guy's desperate, he's trying to sell the property. Then not only the value of that field, but people are scared to lend him money now because he's desperate and maybe he's destitute. So he doesn't want people to know. So he says, you know what, don't write the star. No one has to know. So he can change his mind about the star, but not about the actual transaction because it happened already. But he says to him, make the kinyan on the condition that you also write a mashtar. Then chayze beim b'shtar. So made a kinyan. Since the kinyan hinges on the star being written, and he's allowed to change his mind about the star because he didn't write it, so he can change his mind about the kinyan. That's actually three mashtaris. Two you just said right now. One is that he can change his mind by star. Second one is that if he made it conditional that the kinyan does not take place until the star, then he can change his mind about both. And either the third one is im kodam meicher. The meicher goes in first. The kosev is a star. We learned before that a meicher can sell a star. He knows that he has to sell his field. He doesn't know who, when, what. So he prepares himself. He writes a star, has everything ready. just maybe the name is missing, or he writes the name of the guy he knows who's interested in it, but he wants, as soon as the guy says yes, he doesn't want the guy to change his mind. Right away, the document signed, that's it. And all done. So he's allowed to do it. You're not allowed to write a star loan like that, but you're allowed to write because you might lose it, then the guy will have to pay you for no reason. But here, what's the worst thing will happen? The guy he lose it, the guy will find it. It's your own problem. You're happy to write the star. The moicha, who writes the star? The moicha. If you're happy, take the risk. Why should we worry more about you than yourself? So there's a third din of star. If he jumped in the head and he wrote the star, because you learned. You write a star to moicha even though the lekech is not there. As soon as that person went ahead and made a kinyan chazaka, let's say on the property, the star wherever it may be, it's a third din regarding star. It's kind of that's referring to the star. That's a proof that the word that star also including the word nechasim is niktin in am nechasim sheyesh la nechayis because star chazaka. So here we're saying the word nechasim includes everything. Machmer behem iker nechasim. Behem is also called nechasim. Now we learned hamakdish nechasim. You say all my nechasim should come hegdish. But behem, if you had animals there, ruya legab mizbeh, they were suitable. There's no blemish. They were suitable for mizbech. Zecharim, a male has to be an oilam. The Gemara talks about you sell the oilam with the money, it says right here. When the kavis, so there's charim and oilers and the kavis. Now the kavis are shlamim and the zocher is an oilam. So you sell it, and with that money, you sell these animals, this to be an oiler, this to be a shlamim, and the money you give to bedek abayis. Why the animals themselves don't go is a machlekes. We'll learn the Gemara when we catch. You sell it for that person. The kavis you sell for shlamim. So we see that when you said I'm only makdish my nechasim, and my animals became kodesh also. Oifais, birds are included in the chasim. Ikir nechasim. Now we learned why the Gemara can just say that nechasim includes everything, because there's one thing that we remember the shaila, and therefore we couldn't say that. As we'll see, we're building our way up. Oila is ikir nechasim. Says I'm makdish nechasim by ben dvarim yenes wine shmanim oil vipers and birds. They're all included. Tefillin ikir nechasim. Because tefillin you might say it's kodesh. What do you mean it's mine nechasim? On the other hand, because tefillin is considered more an erubin, tefillin and fine Shabbos and mitzvah tefillin, you can wear it. It's a lavush. So tefillin is sort of in between. Is included in the chasim. Now we learned hamakdish in the chasim meilen like tefillin. If you makdish in the chasim, tefillin are included. Some say it means that you have to redeem the tefillin because it belongs to Hegdish now. Our last question is sefer Torah. If you're makdish a sefer Torah, is a sefer Torah included in that? What's the shaila? Why is it then different? He on the lame is dabbing. You're not allowed to sell a sefer Torah. You're allowed to sell all your fill everything else. You're not allowed to sell a sefer Torah. The asal is wuna. You're not allowed to sell a sefer Torah. So therefore, the chassid is not the chassid is something you have control. Definition is anything that's mine. What's the definition of mine? That I have total control. I can make it hefker. I can sell it. But a sefer Torah, you're not allowed to sell. Only two isnam and only two exceptions that you're allowed to sell. So the etzim you're not allowed to sell. So therefore, maybe. Or since we learned that you're allowed to sell you're allowed to sell a sefer Torah to learn Torah. If you want to learn Torah, you need money. Or to marry a woman, you're allowed to, just like you're allowed to leave it Yisrael for these reasons. Maybe in the chassid, you sell a little control. Take cool. What's fascinating is there's a sheiltus Rabbi Chaim Gaon brought down in Taisa and Avodah Zarah. Somewhere in the Yud, your Aleph, you basically give me $1 or your $1. One of those stuff. Fascinating cases. We always learn that Lilma Torah, Release Isha are the two biggest mitzvahs. As Release Isha, because Loi Toyu Bro, we had Mobasa, Ela Lesheves Yitzara, this is a big thing. And Lilma Torah, obviously, Talmud Torah cool. But for anything else, that's normal pshat. There it talks about if you're allowed to leave it to throw for certain reasons. And Lilma Torah Release Isha, you got to be matami yourself in the base of pras. If a kohen is allowed to go to a place with a suffix of a cave or not, which is lochem and you're not allowed to. But if you're going to learn Torah, you're going to marry a woman, the Gemara says you're allowed to. So part of pshat is because these are the most serious mitzvahs that we have. Part of pshat here comes along of Shulchan Aruch and he turns it on his head, and you have to understand what he's saying. But Taisa quotes him. Rabbi Chaim says that Lilmoy Torah v'lishi iser zehu shnei mitzvahs hakalim b'Torah. The choshken shar mitzvahs. Go understand that. These are the easiest mitzvahs in the Torah to get married and to learn Torah all the time. Choshken shar mitzvahs. That's talked about kohen based on pras. So interesting. What would you like in Gemara Megillah when it says you're not allowed to sell a sefer Torah only for these two things? According to the Shilders, does it mean koshken for any other mitzvah? Or is he only talking about the case over there of a Kayan Matamas? Fascinating. Okay, homework, find out what shot that to prove who is the easiest mitzvah or it's a lifetime. A little bit tighter. It's big Ashmias and a Ruchnis. It's not the easy mitzvah. Exactly. Nafshi choshka b'Torah, he said. I can't help it. I have to learn.